Morning, Rosalie and Geoff. Welcome to Red Gum. Fantastic having you guys with us. For those that don't know, Rosalie, you are the new Uniting Church minister in Bairnsdale, which is very exciting. And Geoff is part of Red Gum. In fact, the name Red Gum, you came up with it, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was such a good name. I'd already named my poultry stud Red Gum.
Don't tell people that you've got a whole mob of chooks called Red Gum Poultry. No,
it's a good name.
it is a great name. It's a great tree, isn't it?
It is.
An Aussie tree, yes, yep. So, and Rosalie, being here in Bairnsdale, how long have you been here now for?
Since September, so a couple of months.
Yes, and you've started going back to being able to gather again on a Sunday morning.
Yes, last Sunday was our first one with everyone back.
Yep, fantastic. I was thinking, as we're going to have this conversation today on relational and emotional health, I thought we might go back to childhood, start there with a memory of something that's like a fond memory, Geoff, or, something you can think of, and I'm sure it involves me, right?
No, actually, the one I'm thinking of doesn't.
The fond memories don't involve me. We've got to wait till we get to Rosalie. Yes.
I don't know where you were at the time. I think
Okay.
Once you're around the 17-year-old age, you're sort of always off doing something. But
Yes.
I just remember a really fond memory for me was when we used to go down to our holiday house down at Phillip Island. Dad would often leave us down there with Mum while he was still sort of working, and we'd be down there for all summer. And my younger brother and I, Ken, we used to love going fishing down at the jetty every single day. And we had an arrangement with Rosalie that any fish we caught, she said she was happy to fillet them for us. And I don't know who cooked them up. Hopefully Rosalie, not Mum. But yeah, we just used to love spending all day down at the jetty. And to this day, I can't believe the amount of freedom we were given as teenagers or even boys.
It was neglect, Geoff. It was neglect.
Well, I haven't neglected my children, that's for sure. I haven't given them the same freedoms that I was given. Yeah, so that was a really fond memory, those special times, holidaying down at the beach house. Yeah.
It was basically go away in the morning and come back when it's dark.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Or if Mum needed us, she'd hang something out on the balcony.
And try not to steal too many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was you.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got caught though, so yes. Rosalie, a fond memory from childhood.
Well, one of my fond memories goes back earlier, and it did include you.
Ah, good.
Because it was a whole of a family thing where we'd read stories together. Okay. And sometimes it'd be Bible stories, but sometimes it'd be chapter books, and we'd read it in serial form over a number of days or nights, but we'd take turns in reading it.
Okay, and that's that fond memory.
Yeah.
Yep, fantastic. Well, because we're having conversation on sort of relationships and emotional health, I was thinking in your role as a minister, and you've been a missionary to Thailand, you've led churches in Melbourne and Shepparton for 13 years and now here in Bairnsdale, you must see a lot of people that don't always have fond childhood memories, that have trauma from the growing up, and that they struggle to mature emotionally, they struggle to have health in those areas emotionally. What have you noticed as a generalisation that you find in people that you keep coming up with again and again? What are some of the areas that people struggle with emotionally?
Look, I've done a lot of foster care.
Okay.
And so I see a lot of struggling emotionally in children because of trauma, because of hurts in their life, and often because of they've been let down, there's been broken trust, there's fear, and so there's a lot of struggling with fear and anger, and also perhaps uncertainty is where they belong. So all of that, and I think that sets up for them a very keen sense of focus on survival.
Okay.
And so if they sense they're going to be hurt in some way, then the fight-flight response hones in very quickly. And so either they go on the attack and get aggressive type behaviour, or they withdraw.
So does this lead to a situation where John is running around outside of a school with a kid on the top of the car roof, jumping on the roof and not wanting to come down, that sort of thing?
That has happened.
That has
yes.
happened, yes.
Yes. And so you see that also carried into adulthood sometimes, where there's been those hurts and those perhaps lack of sense of where they belong, lack of and going on the defensive very quickly.
As an adult, you mean?
As an adult
Yes,
as well
yes.
as a child. And because of those past hurts, something's said a bit thoughtlessly, perhaps not thinking, or an insensitive action, and you get this big reaction that seems to be out of proportion to what's been said or done.
Yes.
But it's not just reacting to that, it's reacting to the previous hurts.
Yes.
And because there's perhaps a lack of security in who they are, where they belong, a sense of self-worth, and being able to trust people, then you get that, again, that sort of either they withdraw or they go on the attack.
Yep.
Because it's a way of protecting yourself, of surviving.
Yes.
And so what happens then is people who, might sort of think they're reaching out, but they get this reaction. And so then they tend to
They pull back
away.
Yes.
As
and
well.
then that person feels rejected.
That's right.
Yes. Yep. So, Geoff, you haven't actually. You're the black sheep of the family. You're the only one that hasn't actually pastored a church in your own right. But just in life, you get to work and experience a lot of life with different people, and you've actually been part of churches and boards and helped the Christian school get established. You've carried a lot of leadership responsibilities, and even within Redgum, you're a board member. You're one of our key leaders. Where do you see people struggling emotionally? Is it a little bit similar to what Rosalie was saying? Where do you see people, even lack of maturity in their healthy way they respond?
I see it similar to how Rosalie's explained it, and often the outcome of it is you can talk to people about problems that they're having, and you can even share with them God's principles and the things that they need to do to move forward out of that. And yet it's like no matter what they hear and even agree with, it's like there's this bondage that stops them from making the right choices. It's a little bit like, here's the path out of here, let's start by making these choices, and they just don't choose to do them. And you see it time and time again, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about marriage relationships or sibling relationships, because that can be there's a lot of problems in that area. But it's almost like an unwillingness to go forward and do what they actually know is the right thing to do.
So do you think it actually is unwillingness, Rosalie? Do you think it's an inability, or Geoff, you're suggesting that they know what to do but they're unwilling?
Unwilling or almost unable. It's like this bondage holds them back because of the hurt and the pain that's got them in that position in the first place.
So is that how you would see it, Rosalie, or differently?
And to some extent, and I think that what's holding them back can be fear. It may not be a conscious thing, it might be a subconscious thing.
That survival thing you talked about earlier. Yep.
And so it's that fear that maybe it won't work out, or rejection, or this is the place that I know and feel comfortable with.
Yes.
It may not be what I want or what I like, but at least it's what
familiar.
I know.
Yep. So what have you done in your role in ministering to people over the years? What have you done to try and help people move forward?
Well, I think the first thing is that you don't react to their reactions.
Okay.
and you don't allow that to be determining it, but you try and respond to the underlying hurt and what's going on
Yep.
underneath, because I think that's where, if you just keep reacting, it just keeps escalating and you don't deal with it. You've got to respond to the hurts and the needs.
Almost as if they're symptoms of something deeper.
Yeah, and so I think it's that, helping them to build trust again in relationships.
So how do you actually do that in a practical way?
Well, it's depends on the situation, of
Yes.
course, but it's to keep loving, to keep being who you are, and to be consistent, and not all over the place.
So can you think
and
of
to be a person they can trust,
Yes.
and know that, whatever, you're still there for them.
Yes. Yep. So can you think of a specific example of that in someone's life that, like, we're not going to be sitting around here all day talking and telling other people's stories, but can you think of a situation where you've actually stayed stable when someone has been actually pushing back and emotionally letting go at you, but you've stayed and not reacted to that?
Yes.
Right.
Well, I think both in a child
Yes.
who's perhaps, I can think of someone who, just ran out of the house and down to the river.
Right.
And it was just about staying with them and just talking with them. And
So this is a child that you got in foster care,
yes.
and they've run out the house and down the
Yes,
river. Okay,
yes.
and so you followed them.
Yes.
Yep.
And so it's about just having. The thing is, you want to get them back quickly because you don't want to waste time.
Right.
But sometimes you need to waste that time.
Yes.
Just to be with them until they feel able to come back.
Yes.
Again. And again with, I guess, adults in the church is about not letting the things they've said or their reactions to push you away, but to keep reaching out to them.
Yep.
And responding out of love rather than out of anger or
Sure.
the emotions they're having.
So, Geoff, what have you done personally? Can you think of a situation where you've been actually able to help someone?
I think for me, it's been more just walking alongside people that are going
Yes.
through a tough time, and I guess I try and be an example or even a mentor,
Yes.
and encourage them and keep on encouraging them. I know we all respond to tough times in very, very different ways, and so hopefully examples that I've set can help encourage someone too, because your life doesn't have to be messed up just
Yes.
because some things have happened, or
Yes.
we actually do have a lot more choices than I think people realise.
Okay.
And almost it's just the way we live. We're making choices all the time.
Yeah. Yep. And I actually had someone text me a question this morning to ask you both. So, in a sense, we've just been talking about other people, but for you personally, what have you found growing up? What did Mum and Dad do? What did the church that we were part of, what did that contribute to your own emotional health and well-being? Can you think of anything that Mum or Dad did to contribute to that, Rosalie? Like, I'm thinking through a parenting eyes, through a parent who's listening now, what can they do that would help their kids?
I think the unconditional love
Yes.
and acceptance in terms of behaviour stuff, there was always clear boundaries.
So is that something you felt with mum and dad growing up?
Very much so. And
Yes.
whatever we tried to do, we were always encouraged and affirmed.
Yes.
And there were clear boundaries for us,
Yep.
but there was lots of freedom
Yes.
within that.
Like, as we said, neglect. Yep. Go away and don't come back. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we felt safe and secure in their love.
Yes.
And if you feel safe and secure and a sense of belonging and who you are, that gives you a freedom to step out and risk things.
Yes.
And to be able to deal with setbacks.
Yes.
That sort of emotional resilience that comes from that.
And Geoff, what about for you? What did mum and dad do to help?
Well,
set you
firstly, Lex made it really easy for us.
Yes, I charged through the hard ground.
Because Lex did all the
heavy lifting.
The heavy lifting, or let's say,
help their parenting.
After having Lex as a son, the next 4 children seemed like perfect angels.
So you actually were a lot better, actually.
So and mum and dad were probably more experienced too
Yes.
with what they'd learnt from Lex.
I trained them well. Yeah.
But I know Rosalie and I were both tried to do what mum and dad said and had that willingness to want to be good, which I know you were made a little bit differently. But to me, one of the greatest things mum and dad did for me and what I would like to be able to do for my own kids is that my whole life growing up, I felt that I could do anything because that's how mum and dad had raised me. They just encouraged me that if I wanted to do something, I could. I mean, at 21, I built my own house and I knew very little about building, very little.
Yes.
But I didn't even consider that, hey, maybe I could fail or waste a heap of money.
Or even more the point, failure was not an evil thing. It's okay to fail.
Yes. And not everything I've tried to do have I succeeded with at all, but it was just that consistency of encouragement all the time.
Yes.
And also in the area of relationship, I don't ever remember mum and dad fighting or, yelling at each other ever.
Yes.
And that example, and yet I know they're made very, very different. And there would have been, I know they thought differently about different things, but it never seemed to become a divisive thing. They obviously worked through it quietly, but not in front of us at all.
Okay, so what about the church that you grew up in? Did that contribute anything? Can you remember anything there?
Just one part I really loved thinking of the church at Donald.
Yes.
I loved how everyone in the church was sort of involved in things, and like Saturday afternoons we'd have tennis and lots of people would come, and the adults used to encourage us as kids to join in, and remembering John Bassett, and being asked to team up with John and play was, as a young kid, I mean, I was like 11, 12 and I wasn't very good at tennis anyway, but you just felt like a hero when someone older in the church was inviting you to participate, or whether it was cricket matches or things like that, when you had lots of different ages all together. And it's something that I don't think we see as much in our culture today, and yet it's something that I remember I really loved.
Yes. What about for you, Rosalie?
I'd agree with that. I think for me, sense that church was like a second home.
Yes.
Often it was next door to where we're living anyway,
true, yeah.
and it was just an extension of that. But there was that sense of it was like being in part of our home and part of our family, extended family. And we'd always be having people over to our place for meals, and we'd be going to other places.
Yes.
And that intergenerational thing was really important and something experienced. But I've also seen it with the foster children I've had. Most of them have really loved being part of the church and going to church. And I think it's part of that they feel welcomed and loved and accepted and given attention. And I can think of one little, 5-year-old who used to take turns sitting with different ones in the congregation who were over 80, the 80s and 90s year olds, and she'd go and sit with one for a while, and then she'd go and sit with one for a while, and she had been with us for quite a while and then went back to her own mum and then came back into care with us again, and was asking about, one of the first things she said was, "Are we going to church on Sunday?"
Yep.
And I said yes, and we got to church and she opened the door and rushed out the door and she said, "So good to be back at our church again." And, went to sort of greet all the, the different ones, and that intergenerational welcome, acceptance, involvement, I
that
think
safe
it's really important.
grandparent type figure for a kid like that. Very, very powerful. Yeah. And so, like, Rosalie, you are naturally a resilient person, right? I don't see you having many bad days. God's wired you with a choleric type personality. You just got to push through whatever happens, right? Jump on a plane and go to Thailand as a young woman and care for Thai people for 11 years. But I know that in the last couple of years, you've hit your own personal wall when it comes to health, and being diagnosed with bowel cancer and being operated and having cancer taken out of your body and facing a life and death situation. How did you handle that emotionally? How did you deal with that?
It was interesting because it came as such a surprise.
Yes.
And, I did one of those bowel tests that we're all meant to do and thinking it'd come back normal, and it didn't. And then, you go for your colonoscopy and told, well, the majority of situations is not anything. So expecting, well, it's not going to be anything. And then when I was told, well, actually, you have cancer and you need surgery. And so it came as, I guess, a bit of a shock and sort of out of the blue because, I was going along, I felt good and healthy and, thinking, well, likely to live another 20, 30 years, who knows, and plenty of thoughts about what I might be doing with that time.
Yes.
And so you're suddenly confronted, well, maybe you won't have that.
Yes.
And so, that was a surprise and a shock, but it was interesting because there was that real sense that, well, I'm in God's hands, and even if this is it, even if, the surgery or whatever's not successful and I only have a short time to live.
Because when you did that when they did the surgery,
yes,
you were classed as stage 3, weren't you? Is that correct? No, stage
2.
Stage 2. I'm giving you an extra number.
Yes.
Yep.
So it fortunately hadn't spread outside the bowel.
Yes, but they didn't know that fully, did they?
They didn't know that until they
operated.
They went in.
Sorry. Yep.
So some of that is sort of, the waiting time.
Yes.
But there was this real sense that even if this is the end, if you like, that I'd had 60 years of living as a child of God, a follower of Jesus, to the best I could.
Yep.
And I had a real sense of thankfulness.
Yep.
And yes, there was a part that would be disappointment that, I wouldn't have those extra years.
Yes.
But at the same time, generally there was that sense, well, I'm in God's hands.
Yep.
And I thank God for the wonderful years I've had, and a lot of people don't get that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know, like for Geoff, Leonie, your first wife, she didn't get 60 years,
That's right.
38 years,
39.
39. Don't always get me numbers right. How did, and that was different for you because Rosalie's journey was her own journey, but you were watching someone you loved, and you lost someone you loved at a very young age when you got 3 young children. And it's not just an event; it's a process. So how did you cope? Where did you find the strength to come through reasonably intact? Right.
I think the main thing was that for the entire time, I just knew that God was in control regardless of what the outcome was.
Yes.
And we actually thought that we had seen a long-term miracle. In fact, the doctors all said it was a miracle that Leonie lived 4 years, and that was a
Yes,
miracle.
yes.
And because originally she was given 6 months to live, 12 months at the most, and we had 4 very special years, and most of that time she was able to do most things.
Yes.
Yeah, and it didn't hold her back tremendously. So the bottom line is that I trust my God more than I trust my feelings. Yes, there were some difficult days in there, and yet none of them stopped me believing in God. None of them stopped me hoping for the best,
Yes.
praying for obviously a different result than we ended up with. And yet I was able to accept that there's things that happen that we don't know the answers to. And I remember talking to Dad once, and because Dad believed so fervently that Leonie would be completely healed. And then when Leonie died, I had a conversation with Dad, and I said, how do you sort of balance in your own mind how you believe Leonie would be completely healed and she wasn't? And he said, well, quite simply, I know that no one can ever say that there wasn't enough faith that Leonie would be healed, because he believed so strongly that she would be.
Yes.
And he said, that's all my job is.
The rest is up to
and
God.
so the rest is up to God, and the result's different to what he thought it was going to be. But
Yes.
then Dad, being buoyant as he is, which I've got a bit of that too, is you keep on journeying and just trying to live the way that God wants you to. And I've seen over the last, 22 years, whatever it is, I've seen many people that have lost a spouse through sickness at a younger age, and many of those people just never get over it.
Yes.
And it almost trashes them for their whole life.
Yes.
But I know for me, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget Leonie, and I know that a grieving process is something that I think keeps going for the rest of your life.
Yes.
It's not a lack of grieving at all, but I know that I have been able to continue living and enjoying life and learn to love again, which is where I've learned to love Kath and marry
Yes.
Kath. And it's like these things can hold you back forever, or they can be part of your journey, parts that aren't what you wanted to happen.
Yep.
But God can use them to help us be an encouragement to others. And you see some people, and it's amazing what's happened in their life that a lot of people obviously don't know, and yet they come through so strongly. And there's others that some things happen and it just destroys them forever.
Yes.
And I don't ever want to be one of those people, because I believe we have a God of hope and a God that can bring us through it and can heal us. And I believe I am totally healed from the pain associated with that journey.
Yes. Yep. And obviously, each of us has a personal walk with God and an understanding this relationship with God. Do you think that is fundamental to emotional health and relationships? What do you think, Rosalie?
Yes, I think that feeling secure in God's unconditional love
Yes.
for us and being held in God's hands, whatever happens, enables us to be able to face those hard stuff
Yes.
and deal with things emotionally as well. I think, though, how do we know that love of God?
Yep.
And the scriptures talks about perfect love casts out all fear.
Yes.
And so it's knowing that love that's able to deal with the fears that are within us, I think. I think most of us experience that love of God through people around us.
Yep, that's a great point, isn't it?
Who
Yep.
know God's love
Yes.
and can express that love to us in a way that helps us when our emotions are all over the place.
Yep. And I guess that in general is the local church, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Where you, Geoff, you talked about growing up with a local church feeling like family. Now, that's not everyone's experience. Sometimes people get hurt in churches, right? And it's not God's plan. It's not how it should be. But if you put enough people together, someone's going to hurt someone, aren't they? You know.
Yeah.
But how do we help people in a local church? How do we create that safe environment? Any thoughts of what we as individuals can contribute to that?
Well, we've got to have relationship with people in our local church, or we actually won't know what's going on.
Yes.
And so we've got to be healthy and healthy ourselves in our relationship with God and our emotional, where we're at emotionally, but it's spending time getting to know other people that you actually find out what's sort of happening behind the scenes that you may not notice on the surface. And so if you're not prepared to put people first and put some time into other people, then it's like it's all just show.
Yes.
And I know that's a challenge for me because I tend to have a pretty strong work ethic and seem to commit to a lot of things. So I'm quite busy, but there's a little saying in our house that I always keep reminding myself of, and I'll say, people come first. So I might have all these plans of what to do, and then someone drops in, so you just throw all your plans out. There's always tomorrow, and invest some time into people. But I need to be better in that area than I am, because it's not just about people that come to you. I need to be a bit more proactive in actually going out and encouraging others as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Rosalie. You spoke earlier of the thought of wasting time, chasing that little child that's run down the river, and you had a choice of, do I invest time into this child, or do I, which is a waste of time in some ways, right? Well, you saw it as an investment. And I was talking to my daughter Mandy this morning, and she's saying, Dad, we live in a world that's very focused on outcomes, the external, and to build emotional health and to build relational health is an investment of time.
It takes time.
Yep. Yep. And you got to have a willingness to do it, but it actually deteriorates down to time, right?
Yeah.
And time is something that we have limits of, and yet you invest something of your life into another person. It's very powerful. Yep. Well, I really appreciate you both sharing this morning with your own journeys. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to comment or say, Rosalie? Anything that you want to comment on this subject?
Oh, I think we've covered it
Yeah?
fairly well, given the time and space we have.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's so much in this area to explore and to be aware of.
Yes.
And I think there are times when people need to get professional help as well
Yes.
to deal with some of the
That's
stuff
true,
and some of the
yes.
baggage.
Yes.
But I think our job as Christians is simply to love people and be with them and help them along that journey.
Yeah. Geoff, anything you wanted to add?
No, but I'm just reminded that we definitely do need to be journeying with and alongside other people, because even though we've had a super stable upbringing, which has had a massive effect on who we are and how we've become, the fact is that most people haven't had such a fortunate or blessing of an upbringing that we've had, and so anything that we're able to do in journeying along with other people and helping them I think is one of the greatest gifts that we can give other people from
Yep.
from a place of strength, being able to encourage others and give them hope, and that they can have a future that they really love and enjoy.
Yeah, no, that's a great thought. Yep. So, thank you to both of you. And it's true, Rosie, what you just said. We cover so little in this time, and I want to make sure that people know that we as a church are available, because sometimes you just need to sit down personally with someone. Just listening to this is not enough. It's a start, but if you're feeling that I need to talk to someone, I certainly want to be available. We've got people that are very skilled and gifted in counselling, and we want you to talk to us. Like, don't just let stuff rise up when you hear this and think, oh, I need, well, contact us. We'd love to hear from you. So it does take many ways to bring healing and health into someone's life. And Jesus came to set us free of all the stuff that's taken place negative, and to re-establish and rewire us and give us an identity. So thank you to both of you. And that's it from us. Thank you. See ya.